This is Eye of the Storm, a St. John's video series presented by Junkless Protein. St. John's Red Storm, they're one of the hottest teams in college basketball right now. They've won 13 straight games. They're coming off a statement win against Creighton on Saturday. And now they're heading into what you could consider maybe their biggest test of the season. It's a road showdown at UConn, followed by a massive matchup home against Villanova. So the question right now is, how real is this St. John's team, and what could these next two games mean for their Big East and NCAA tournament outlook? So joining me, as always, on Eye of the Storm is the man who covers the Red Storms closely as anybody and also is a messenger for the great Rick Patino. Your co-St. John's beat writer, Zach Braziller, joins me now. Zach, what's going on, my guy?
What's up? I think Rick had to throw in a compliment because usually he just hammers me at press conferences. He was he was in such a good mood. He was like, let me throw him a bone here since I'll probably torch him on Wednesday. So
I have to be fair. The last press conference you were at, that is maybe the most complimentary I've heard Rick Patino be to you all season. All season. I've seen him complimentary in the past.
When you win 13 in a row, you feel good, man. That's all I got to say.
That is a fair point. You should be in a good mood. You should be in a good mood.
Yeah.
Zach, let's get to the Johnnies here because we talked about this when we were talked on Saturday after the game. They've won 13 straight games. We saw them dismantle Creighton. I think that really turned heads how their performance was before this UConn game. But when you step back and look at this run as a whole, what has been the most defining characteristic of this team during this 13-game winning streak?
I think it's their ability to win in different ways. The start of the streak, they were dominant. They killed Butler on the road. They killed Creighton on the road. They, come back to the Garden. They beat up Marquette pretty bad. Then they go to Nova and they only won by 7, but they were really in control. They were up big second half. And then the second half of this run, it's been a lot of close games. It's been finding a way to win at Xavier, finding a way after being down 15 at home to Seton Hall. Finishing up, being great at the end against UConn. That to me is kind of what's impressive is they've had really good performances where they've cruised. They've had not so good performances where they found ways to win. So I think it's just no matter how they're performing, it's kind of finding ways. Now, I thought they hadn't played great after the UConn win. They had struggled at home against Xavier. At Providence and at Marquette weren't great performances. They had to have really good finishes in both those games. And then they come back at home and they play a Creighton team that just shocked UConn and just blew their doors off. Now, I think St. John's is just a really bad matchup for Creighton. I just don't think they match up well. But look, when you beat a team by 30, especially, a team that's just beat UConn and is probably going to finish top 5 of the league, you're doing something right. So I just think they've just been able to they've won in all kinds of different ways.
No, they absolutely have. I think when you look at this, where the season's turned around, Zach, I guess my question for you is, how much of this turnaround can be traced back to an inflection point in the season, or is it more of a gradual process of the team just buying into what Rick Patino wanted this season? Do you look at it as one point where this all sort of changed, or this was kind of a gradual process all along?
Part of me says it's a new team. It was going to take time. And I think that's true. And the other part of me says it's Dylan Mitchell starting, dummy. And I'm talking to myself, obviously.
Yeah.
They've just been, obviously Dylan Darling's been great lately and really during this win streak, but it's been Dylan Mitchell. It's been Dylan Mitchell. It's been leaning into their strength, which is the front court. For a big part of the early part of the season, they were going with a lot of 3-guard lineups, and it was hurting them on the defensive glass. They didn't have enough playmaking out there. And look, some of this is on Mitchell. He wasn't great early, especially against the better teams. He wasn't great, but this 13-game win streak, he's been incredible for the most part. Maybe had a off gamer here or there, but their defensive rebounding has done a complete 180. He's a terrific playmaker at 6'8". He's incredible in transition. Look, Zuby's been Zuby all year. Bryce Hopkins, there's no doubt, has played much better over the last 6 weeks. He's was just named the Big East Player of the Week, and he deserved it. Um, Dylan Darling has been a revelation, in this win streak. But to me, it's the combination of Mitchell playing really well and them leading into that big three lineup. Um, there's just no one in this league that can handle that front court. And we
Yeah.
saw it the other day. They
Okay.
absolutely dominated. And Zuby didn't even play the last 11 minutes. And they absolutely dominated. I mean, I think they combined for something like 36 points, like 24 rebounds, 11 assists. And that was with very, limited minutes. I mean, they could have probably went for something like 45, 35.
Yeah.
There's just, there's nobody in this league can handle them. Now look, the tournament will be different when they face bigger, more athletic teams. Um, but if you look in even like some of their tough losses, like Iowa State, that three big lineup was really good, and they almost beat Iowa State, one of the best teams in the country. They used it a lot against Alabama, and they led that game with about 6-7 minutes left. So yeah, I mean this. I thought going into the year they had one of the best front courts in the country, and over the last 6 weeks, they have obviously been one of the premier front courts in the country.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt they have been that for sure. When you look at this team defensively, because you talked about the defensive rebounder, which has been good when you tie it to the front court, but when you look at this team defensively, and particularly to where they were earlier in the season, Zach, where are you seeing Rick Pitino's fingerprints all over this defense? How much of that are you seeing with this defense right now?
Yeah, look, their guards are clearly giving better effort. They're clearly kind of understanding more of what is expected. I feel like Josan Sanin has really gotten better defensively. Dylan Darling is, he has obviously shortcomings with his size and guys can shoot over him, but his ball pressure and his, ability to make steals is really been a big factor here. You know, I wrote this really early in the year, and I probably jumped the gun a little because it was kind of after a bye game. But I said like I thought they had the potential to have a a different defensive presence because of the Mitchell Zuby combo. Because you have two big
Mm,
guys who can guard on the perimeter, and when one of them switches out to guard a guard, you still have another guy inside who's a rim protector. And they didn't have that last year.
right.
They were kind of small. They would go Aaron Scott at the four, and as good of a defender he is, Aaron Scott's not a rim protector. But the Zuby and Mitchell combo is just so good. So like when teams put Zuby in a pick and roll, he guards a guard. He stays with the guard number one, and number two, you still have Mitchell to protect the rim. Last year, when you had Zuby out, you know, on a switch defending a guard, there really wasn't anyone under the basket to protect the rim. And I just think when you have two guys like two athletic, switchable, versatile big men who block shots, it's just it's a luxury very few teams have. Like I mean, we've seen a million times where like teams will put Zuby or Mitchell in a pick and roll. They'll switch on to the guard, and the guard can't get past them. Like, and to have one guy like that's a luxury. Two is just, to me, that's what's made their defense so good. Look, they're not as
Mm,
good on the perimeter defensive last year. They were never going to be. You're not. Kadari Richmond's a terrific perimeter defender. Davon Smith and. Terrific defender. R.J. Lewis, when his head was in the right spot, was a really good perimeter defender. But they're better defensively on the interior. And Bryce Hopkins has played really good defense too.
yeah.
And he got on the floor for a loose ball the other day, which kind of stood out to me. So like the front court's been terrific. The guards have gotten better. I think they're up to now 14 or 15 in defensive efficiency. Like they're really defending. And Saturday was great. And I thought the last 10 minutes against Marquette was really good. Like really good. I
Yeah.
mean, I think they held them without a field goal for like 8+ minutes. Like they're now doing that like consistently, where like teams are not scoring on them for large stretches. So yeah, their defense it's not as good as last year, but there are areas where they're actually better defensively.
Yeah, that Marquette game, you're right. It was over 8 minutes where they didn't score a field goal, and I was really impressed with that. And then they were locked in all the way on Saturday, like you said, against Creighton, which I agree with you, tough matchup for them, but they were really, really locked in. Defense has been great. We have talked a lot about, you mentioned Dylan Mitchell. We've talked a lot in the last couple of weeks about Darling. We've talked about his improvement too. You just mentioned Bryce Hopkins. and I want to talk to him about him too because he's had some big moments during this 13-game winning streak. How important would you say is his presence been in giving this team just another dimension and how they can look both offensively and defensively? How big has he been?
Yeah, I mean, look, you take out the two Providence games, which, obviously struggled, and we all know there's a lot of other stuff going on there.
Right.
Um, but you take out those two Providence games, like he's been really good now for a while. Um, this past week he was awesome. I mean, his second halves in a lot of these games have been off the charts. The
Mm,
game at Xavier when they were down big, his second half was great. The Villanova game, he completely dominated the second half of that game. Completely dominated the second half of Marquette. Like he's been really good. He's not shooting great from three. It's the only really not, but like his rebounding has gone way up. He's defending more, and he's really like attacking, getting to the rim, and I know we're going to hit on this more, but like he's one of the keys for Wednesday. I don't think
mm.
there's any question about it. I don't think UConn could guard like I don't think Alex Caravan could guard Bryce Hopkins. Like I don't think UConn has an answer for him. Like they're obviously going to look. They're going to play off Mitchell. They're going to make him shoot. They're probably going to double Zuby a lot. And I think it's going to be up to guys to make shots, and it's going to be up to Hopkins. Like, UConn's going to clearly make adjustments. I think you're going to see more big lineups, which is Jaden Ross maybe at the three, Jalen Stewart at the three. I think you're going to see less three-guard lineups from UConn because how much of an advantage it gives St. John's on the interior. So I think it's going to be Hopkins it's going to be kind of on Hopkins to have a big game. I kind of felt like that in the first game, and he wasn't great in that first one, but he did make some big plays in the second half and had a good second half. But I think it's going to be it's going to be on guys like him and Sellers and Sannon and Darling to make UConn pay. UConn's going to dare St. John's to shoot threes. There's no doubt.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. We're gonna get to the UConn stuff, excuse me, in 1 second. Wanted to ask you about, but we kind of touched on this the other day, but I want to ask you a little bit more, the confidence level of this team, because you've covered a lot of St. John's teams and you've had a handful of good ones to cover.
Handful?
Yeah, maybe handfuls. That might be saying
I
a
think
lot.
that's a
That's too
little
much.
much,
That's a
but
bit much there. I actually caught you're right. That's a good catch there. Handful is a bit much. You've seen a few. That's what we'll say. You've seen a few. So of those few that you've seen, how does the confidence level of where this group is right now compare to the confidence level you've seen of other good St. John's teams? And this could even include last year's team. Where would you say the confidence level is of this team right now heading into this UConn game?
yeah, I think it's getting to what last year had. I don't think it's
Mm,
quite there yet, but I
okay.
do think it's getting to what last year had. Um, yeah, look, there's no question they now expect to win. If the game, it's funny. First 2 months of the year, they couldn't close out games. Alabama, Auburn, Kentucky, Iowa State, they all had leads in the second half of those games. Iowa State, Alabama, and Auburn, they had leads like less than 10 minutes to go, and they couldn't close. And now you know, this team has kind of created a identity of like if the game's close, we're going to win. And you saw that in the first UConn game. They never, they had a big lead. UConn got it to two, and they never blinked. So like they've developed a confidence that they're going to win if the game is close, which is important.
Yeah.
And look, we're gonna like last year's team went to UConn. UConn wasn't as good as this year. Went to UConn, they got down big early. Looked like they're gonna get blown out and came back and won. Can this with this team can this team survive a similar start? I'm not saying they're gonna start like that. I don't know if this team could overcome that kind of start against this kind of a team, on the road. But there's no reason to believe they can't. I mean, they haven't lost on the road yet. And,
True.
like last year's team, they've found ways to win when they're not at their best. Like, I think the biggest, they've had some really good wins in this winning streak, but to me, the best wins in this winning streak were home for Seton Hall, at Xavier, home for Xavier, because those were games they played poorly and it did not look like they were going to win. And they found ways to make big plays when it mattered. And you know, that's going to be so important, um, in March and as the season goes on. Is like you're going to be in tough spots, and I think the schedule early really helped this team because they were in those spots and they didn't find ways to win, and it kind of brought them together, and they've it been in those situations before, and now they've kind of excelled in them. So now it's like they know what to expect, and I think so. Like the blowout wins are nice, and everyone loves when you play well, but winning when you're not, when a lot isn't going right, is so important, and that's what last year was great at, and that's what this year's team has kind of figured out.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And that helps breed confidence. You mentioned that home Xavier win, which was that they did not play
Right.
well in that one, right? And they gutted that one out. That was a really good win there. I think it's good to mention that too. But this is what people came here for. Now the spotlight shifts to UConn. You will be up in Hartford on Wednesday night. What does this matchup, Zach, represent for St. John's in terms of measuring themselves against one of the conference best, particularly on the road? Because we saw the win at home, and that was
Right.
great. But now this is on the road. It's another test. And you told me on Saturday, hey, they win this game, they could pretty much lock up the Big East title. So what does this game represent, not just for that, but also everything for them going forward?
Yeah, like it's huge for the like they have a 1 game lead on UConn. They have the 1 win. They win Wednesday. The league race is basically over. Even if they lose Wednesday, they still would have the tiebreaker, and if they just win out, they would at worst, split the title with UConn and have the 1 seed. To me, it's more about it's more about March, it's more about seeding, it's more about confidence. They can
Mm,
beat anyone anywhere. Right now they're a 5 seed. I had a story in today's paper talking to a bracketologist, Brad Wattel, who said, this is the kind of win you need if they want to get to be a top 4 seed. I still think if they lose this game and they win out and they win the Big East tournament, they could still get a 4. But this is the game. They win this game, it's a big jolt to their resume, and it's a game they want to win. I mean, like this has become a real big rivalry. They've beaten UConn 3 times in a row. They're going to get Connecticut's best shot. It's going to be you would think, a sellout crowd. It's going to be loud. They're going to be, those UConn fans are going to be angry. Um, yeah, it's a game that would basically lock up the league title and also give them a real. It would be a real big jolt to their resume. I mean, it's a monster game. Number UConn latest AP poll, UConn is 6, St. John's is 15.
mm.
A little surprised UConn didn't fall more after losing at home to Creighton. I think St. John's, where they are, is very fair. So yeah, I mean we'll see. I'm interested in kind of the adjustments that Connecticut made, because that first game, yes, they had the turnovers, but St. John's crushed them on the glass,
Yep.
hurt them inside. They really had no answers for Zuby and Hopkins and Mitchell. I'd be interested, like, does Hurley start the same lineup? Does he go bigger? For how long stretches does he go bigger? Because he is not going to let St. John's just overpower them inside again. He's going to go and say, look, we're gonna beg them to shoot threes,
Mm.
and so I think you're going to see tons of double teams on Zuby. I think you're going to see bigger lineups. I think maybe you even see more pressing and trapping from UConn, try to pressure St. John's. Um, so I think they're going to try to go at Darling, make him get in foul trouble, which is something he's susceptible to. I think you're going to see a lot of adjustments from UConn. They're going to try to be the more physical team, the more aggressive team, and we'll see how St. John's responds.
So let's play off of that, because let's say UConn makes those adjustments that you just mentioned there, right? They try to be more aggressive, they try to be more physical. We see bigger lineups, they throw doubles at Zuby, they try to make St. John's basically beat them from the outside. What would a win at UConn, if all that happens and St. John still is victorious? What would that say about this team, both internally and then in the eyes of the college basketball world? If they're able to handle those adjustments, get that win in the road, what would it say about them to get that kind of win?
Yeah, I think people are definitely paying attention, especially since that first UConn win, that St. John's isn't the disappointing team they were in the non-conference. And another one would really kind of stamp it, that they're the premier team in the Big East, that this is a team that could do major damage in March. I do think it's very noteworthy that they've played so well on the road, because you're obviously not going to be at home in the tournament, and they've been really good on the road. Like their shooting numbers have been way better on the road. They've
Mm,
played, for the most part, way better on the road. I know the last 2 road games weren't great, Marquette and Providence. They didn't play great, and they found ways to win. But for the most part, they've been really, really good on the road, especially in the big games. Earlier Creighton on the road was really good. Villanova, they played really well. They've played very well on the road, which is kind of adds to my fascination for this game.
Yeah. I know so much. The last thing for me is I know so much of it, and the fans are definitely they've got this game circled. You've had it circled, I've had it circled. What can they do at UConn? But they've got Villanova after that. So when you look at this two-game stretch, Zach, do you look at it as, hey, like both games back to back, really important in determining? We've talked a lot about how they can be viewed heading into March. This mini stretch, do you look at it as important, UConn and Villanova, that so much can determine how they will be viewed in the next month?
Yeah, I mean, look, to me, UConn's a far bigger game. I also think St. John's is just better than Villanova. They should be a pretty significant favorite. It's going to be a Saturday night primetime game. It's going to be a sellout. Place going to be rocking. To me, it's different.
Mm,
They're supposed to beat Villanova. UConn is going to be favored. UConn is supposed to win this game. Um, Villanova is more of a not a can't lose, but it's a game they shouldn't lose as long as they play well.
that's fair. That is fair. It'll be interesting. Look, it's all about Wednesday night. Wednesday night is going to be a
Yep.
good one. Johnny's fans should be excited. This is what you want. They've been playing well on the road. They have not lost in Biggie's play on the road. It should be a good one there. Do you have a prediction, Zach? What's your prediction? Because you said you're very intrigued to see the adjustments, but what's the Zach Braziller prediction? The people want to know. This is not a message coming from Rick Patino. This is just me asking Zach what he thinks about the prediction. What do you say?
Oof. That's a tough one. I mean, my head thinks UConn responds at home.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know. I just think St. John's a bad matchup for them.
Hmm.
I I'm gonna save my official. I'm gonna post my official prediction on Twitter like an hour before the game. How about
All right, so everybody, if you're not following, please follow Zach.
that?
He deflected here. He ran away from the prediction. He is going to give it to you on Twitter out before the game. I'm going to be looking for that. That should be a fun one on Saturday night. But we got some basketball blizzard talk here on Eye of the Storm. Eye of the Storm, while there's a storm going on outside. So we got to get that done. That is Zach Braziller. Check him out. Follow him for that prediction before the UConn game. You will see. I'm Dexter Henry. We'll catch you next time. Another edition of Eye of the Storm.